Well, the Doomsday Clock was set in 1947, shortly after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At that point, it was 7 minutes to midnight. Later, the analysts abandoned minutes altogether, moved to seconds. It's now set at 90 seconds to midnight for good reasons. We're now facing questions that have never arisen in human history. They will have to be answered soon, or else we're essentially finished. One, of course, is the threat of nuclear war, which is growing both in Europe and in Asia. The other is the inexorable march towards climate destruction. We have a couple of decades in which to deal with it. Methods are pretty well known. If we don't pursue them, we will pass irreversible tipping points, and there will be a steady decline to undescribable catastrophe. That's where we stand now.
I mean, I would add a third to that, potentially, purely based on what Professor Stephen Hawking told me in what turned out to be his last television interview, which when I asked him what was the biggest threat to mankind, he said when artificial intelligence learns to self-design, then that's it. There are some experts out there in the world of AI who believe we may be approaching that eventuality. What's your view of AI and that threat?
I think that's mostly science fiction. I mean, in principle, it is possible to reach what's called singularity, to reach a point where AI might move on independently. But this is such a remote contingency that I really don't see any. It doesn't seem to me worth considering very seriously, especially when we think of the imminent catastrophes that are quite real.
On the catastrophes that you outlined, taking the first one of nuclear war, how close do you think we're getting to that potentially happening with this war in Ukraine? In other words, if Ukraine with its offensive was to push Vladimir Putin back, if it looked like back home in Russia he may be losing the war or is even driven out altogether, do you think he's potentially the kind of person who might actually use a nuclear weapon to seize back initiative?
It's conceivable. Tactical nuclear weapons have apparently been placed in Belarus. The West is taking a ghastly gamble. They're assuming that if Russia faces defeat, which does not look too imminent, but if they do, that Vladimir Putin will pack his bags, slink away silently to oblivion or worse, and will not use the weapons that everyone knows he has to escalate the war up to the point of attacking NATO supply lines in Western Ukraine, in which case there's growing confrontation with NATO. Once you step on the escalation ladder, it's very hard to stop. So it's possible.